friends. Welcome to episode 78 of School Librarians United. I am your host, Amy Herman. This podcast is dedicated to the issues and challenges school librarians face every day. As a school librarian finishing my 13th year, I found myself asking the question, where is the podcast that will help me do my job? I wanted a podcast which addressed the nuts and bolts of running a successful library program. I don't claim to have the answers, but I hope that this is a platform to share resources and exchange ideas. Now is a perfect time to mention that all the ideas and opinions expressed in this podcast by myself, by my interview guests, and listeners who contact the podcast are our own and do not reflect those of our school districts. When incorporating research, I always make sure to cite my sources. So whether you are a novice or a veteran school librarian, this podcast has something for you. I'd like to extend a very special welcome this week to listeners Emily in Iowa, Carrie, and Patrick in Michigan. Patrick is a district librarian in a neighboring community several miles from my own. Some of you may have heard my interview with Patrick in the first episode we recorded in 2020, episode 55, Balancing Act, Work and School. I also wanted to say hello and many thanks to Lorraine in Australia. This week I received an envelope covered with koala and wombat stamps. It took 6 weeks to travel halfway around the world, but it was so fun to open. And now I proudly sport an Australia sticker on my laptop to remind me of my global PLN. I welcome you and all listeners to reach out with your feedback, episode suggestions, and questions either on Facebook, Twitter, or the email address schoollibrariansunited@gmail.com. If you include your mailing address, I will be sure to send you a podcast sticker. And now for today's episode, virtual job interviews, and my interview with Courtney Pentland. I'm so excited to be talking with Courtney Pentland today. Courtney, I can't thank you enough for joining us. The expertise you bring to us is very timely. Typically, my interviews begin with guests describing their current library program. But given the topic of this episode, we're going to focus on Courtney today. So, Courtney, tell us a little about your journey to becoming a librarian.
Okay, so I was a high school English teacher, and while I was doing that, I had a really wonderful working relationship with our school librarian, and I thought, this seems like a pretty cool job. How does one go about making that happen? So our university in Omaha, Nebraska has a library science program, and I met with the director of that program, who happened to be one of my undergraduate teachers from when I was going through my undergraduate program at a different university, and got to know like what I needed to do and what all has to happen in the state of Nebraska to become certified as a school librarian. So basically, it's an almost master's program. It is a master's certificate. It's a master's certification in library science. It's not a full master's degree. It's pretty darn close. So it's 3 or 4 classes away from a master's degree. So you take those classes, and at the time you did not have to take the praxis. Now you do. And then you have your certification, and you are pre-K-12 and can work in any of the libraries in the state. We can also I want to say it's like 12 credit hours, you can apply for your provisional endorsement. So you can be partway through your school library program and get a library job. So that's what I did. I was partway through my school library program and applied for a high school library position. And I think the reason I got the job was because I interviewed the day I was having my daughter. The interview was set up, and my daughter, we had to go in and have a C-section. And I said, well, can we do it later in the afternoon? I have a job interview this morning. And when I went in, they said, well, noticeably 9 months pregnant. And they said, wow, when are you due? And I said, well, that's a funny question. This afternoon I'm going in. And I think they just were like, okay, if she's going to show up on the day that she's scheduled to have her baby, I bet you she'll show up to work. So they offered me the job while I was in the hospital. And I started that fall and was at the high school.
And can I just interrupt for a second? Yeah. I have been in a similar situation where somebody asked me a question in an interview situation, and I had the choice of giving an easy answer or the honest answer. And I think this was a case where you could have been like, oh, it's no problem, but you gave the honest answer. And I think that it always plays to our credit when we're talking about interview questions, that honesty is always going to be the better way to go. Trying to dismiss something or not be completely upfront, really, I think this is a perfect example where it really does leave not only a lasting impression, but a positive one.
Absolutely. And it was one of those where I knew that if I didn't do the interview that day, I didn't know when it was going to happen. So thankfully, our doctor could work around it and everything went smoothly. And yeah, it was wonderful. And the high school that I worked at was a fantastic learning experience because I was still in the program going through all of my classes and had fabulous teachers who were willing to try crazy ideas that I floated past them. And then I was able to have the opportunity to apply for a position within our district office in the library services department. It was the largest school district in Nebraska, is the one that I had worked for. And so we had a library services team, and I came on as a lead teacher and research librarian. So what I did was, part of my job was I ran the professional library, so the print library that was for staff members. I did research for building and district administration. So if they needed to find articles or they wanted to know about background of a certain thing that was being discussed, then I would do a lot of research for them. I'd read through a lot of research studies. I'd call other school districts, stuff like that, and put together reports. And then I worked as an instructional coach, and then worked on curriculum development for the library programs, and then worked in tandem with the other curriculum directors or the curriculum supervisors in other areas to help them with how library could support their programs. So that was my job. It was fantastic. The best part of it was I got to go out and visit 86 buildings I know it's a big district. We have more buildings now, but go out and visit and see people and learn so much from them and see all of the fabulous things that they were doing. And unfortunately, due to some budget cuts, my position was eliminated. And this past year, I switched over to the elementary library world, which was wonderful. They're so sweet. It was a really big gift in my life this year to be at the school I was at, with the staff I was at, with the kids I had. And I'm so sad that I didn't get to finish the year with them because, those kids have my heart.
Friends, I'm trying to wrap my head around this because Courtney she worked at the district level, and having an impact like that at the district level, it just sounds so wonderful because you're working with the administration and having a positive presence for more than 80 libraries in her state. And I have to imagine that was so rewarding because raising our profile of what librarians do and bringing it to the attention of people who can make a big difference in where librarians are. I'm so curious. You are adjunct faculty. What a cool title. You're adjunct faculty for the University of Nebraska, Omaha. So you're working with pre-service school librarians. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
So I am actually working in the program that I attended. So it's the university that I received my certification through, and I went on and I have my master's degree in secondary education, and then I have an administrative certificate that I've just gotten for curriculum, so I could be a curriculum supervisor at some point. with that. So that's the university that I work for. And this is my 10th year coming up this fall. And it is one of my favorite things to do. I have been very lucky and have been able to teach a few different courses within the program. I originally started teaching our methods program, which was basically how to be a teacher in the school library. So a whole bunch of different things went into that component of it. And that since has been morphed into some other courses. But now I am teaching the research and inquiry course, which is kind of my wheelhouse. I love talking about that. That was one of the things I did in my district level position, was work to establish a district-wide inquiry process and to develop K through 12 collaborative lessons in social studies and English language arts district-wide. So that was, I've done a lot of research in that area and a lot of writing in that area and a lot of discussion. So being able to teach this class is like getting to talk about my favorite thing. So I do that in the fall. And then I have been lucky enough to co-teach our practicum course the last few years with another faculty member. And that is people at the end of their program who are going out and visiting and talking with other librarians and kind of getting ready for that transition into their placement. So that's pretty fun. I taught a young adult literature class one summer when they needed an extra person. So I've taught a few different things. But it's super wonderful because our program at UNO is a hybrid program. We only meet 4 times. So we have assignments and interactions and things that happen throughout the month, but we only meet, we did meet in person 4 times. This past semester, the last 2 we had to do virtually. And then I think that may be kind of what we're looking at for fall as well. But it's one of those things where we can make it work. Sure.
Well, I love that. I hearing all of that now, the next question seems ridiculous, but I noticed you've also served on Nebraska's School Library Association board. And so listeners, buckle up. Courtney, how well did you support your School Library Association board?
Okay, so I was a board member for 2 years and then was asked to consider running for a president position. And in School Library Association boards, typically, that's a 3-year commitment because you are the president-elect, then you are the president, and then you are the past president, and you have different responsibilities depending on where you are in that cycle. And I put it off for a little while because I was like in the process of still doing some stuff with school and things like that. So,
nobody's going to judge you. No, nobody's going to judge you. That you don't.
And so I got to the point in my life where I was like, okay, I feel like I can take this on again because it is a commitment. It is a 3-year time frame. So was able to do that and was elected, and I am finishing my past president term this month, and have just had the most amazing people to work with. And I am so thankful for that opportunity because if you are not a member of your state school library association, that's something to consider being a member, but also consider volunteering for a committee or running for a board position, because I had the benefit of being able to learn from all of the librarians that I was visiting in our district, like about 100 librarians that I would interact with. But being on the board and my position at the university allowed me to see beyond what was happening in my district. Because I think sometimes we have this really narrow focus on the requirements and restrictions and our day-to-day existence and what our lived experiences, right? that we don't reach out and see what someone is doing an hour down the road or across the state. We're all doing the same job. We all have different things that we're facing, but we're really all there to support our students and our staff and our school communities. I can learn so much from a librarian who has a school population of 500 kids K-12, even though I'm a high school librarian for 2,200 kids. I can learn so much from somebody who is in 3 different buildings in a K-12 district, and they're the one librarian for that. So it's really opened my perspective on what school librarianship is and how we can support each other and what we can learn from each other. So again, it's just been such a gift to be able to work with the people that I do. And that's why when they asked me if I would stay on as the AASL liaison, so the chapter representative for the organization, it's maybe a little bit more of a relaxed position than what I've had, but to be able to connect with the national organization and bring that information to our members and the school librarians in the state, I was like, okay, yes, I would love to keep working with you. That's, we lift ourselves by lifting others. And I think that this is just one way that I can give back to all of the people who have given to me.
Well, and I appreciate you pointing out that we can learn from one another, irrespective of our grade level. I mean, because what we do share in common is across the board a passion for lifelong learning and a passion for our space and our calling as librarians. So whether you're learning from somebody who teaches middle grade or somebody who teaches high school, I mean, and invariably, as you have pointed out, we do find ourselves moving into different areas of our profession and learning what we have. It really does, help us see the bigger picture, as you say. You and I have met today. We've never met before, but it's very clear just listening to you that you've got library on your mind morning, noon, and night, whether it's the weekends, whether it's the summertime. Honestly, I really am excited because I know you and I are going to have to talk again in season 3.
Oh, I would love to do that so much. And it does. I do kind of feel like I library all the time. And
it's a verb. It's a verb.
It is. I library all the time. I'm constantly thinking about not just how to support like the people in my building, or school community, but also like, how do I share and learn from other people? Because, we get so much from each other. And that's, one of the reasons why, I don't podcast because that's not something I have really learned how to do yet, but I do write for some library journals. I've published professionally for about 10 years, kind of all over the place. I had a really, really sad goal, I know it's not the best, but I wanted to be published in all of the school library journals. That was my professional goal. So I've done that with the Knowledge Quest. I am now a Knowledge Quest blogger, and I consider that I have been in Knowledge Quest, even though I haven't been in the print magazine. But that was kind of my goal, was to be able to publish widely so that I could share my experience with other people, because I have learned so much from people who have shared their experiences with me.
And friends, I've included some links to some articles which Courtney has published, and again, the blog is one. I've included some articles which she's written, and I admire that, because if I could write, I would have a blog. If I could write, I would write articles. As it is, I like to podcast because I am in a house where nobody wants to hear me library. I honestly, at some point, and I love my husband, But the conversation was, isn't there somebody you can talk to about library other than me? I think that it's important that we all find people who want to talk about being school librarians, and this is the way I do it. Friends, I have attached a couple articles that Courtney has written, and it's really great because I admire people who write so well, and it seems with such ease, because for me it's torture. I am so excited to be talking to you today about virtual job interviews, because for the foreseeable future, this is how people are going to be getting their jobs this summer, especially. I've never had a virtual interview. I do have friends who have applied for jobs overseas, and they're like, oh yeah, we just Skyped an interview. And I thought, wow, that's crazy. And now that's the only way anybody's going to be applying for and getting a job. You've had 4 virtual job interviews. Can I ask, did these all take place recently?
They did. So within the last few months. So I decided to explore some options outside of the district that I had been working in, and was able to apply for some positions in a district near ours that I knew a lot of people were in, and I knew incredibly supportive administration. Again, has a library services department with fantastic people that support their librarians. The superintendent's really supportive. So I felt really comfortable with the opportunity to apply and be considered for one of the positions. And they had several openings, and I had the opportunity to interview for 2 elementary positions and 1 high school position.
Wow. So am I correct that the preparation for a virtual interview would be very similar to the preparation that you would do for one that was IRL? Is that correct?
I think there's a lot of the same things that you would want to prepare ahead of time. You would want to make sure your resume is updated with the most recent things that you would want to add to it. Look at, what current resume formats look like, see if there's anything you want to change with that. Obviously, let your references know that you are putting their name out there so that they realize they're going to be contacted and they're comfortable with that. So that's a really important first part of it. And then the thing that I have always recommended to other people, and I did for each of the schools that I interviewed with, is to do your research about that school. You need to spend the time, dig into not just the demographics, because that's important, but I looked through the course catalog for the high school to see what classes they offered, to see if there were ways that it connected to the classes I worked with at my previous high school. Like, are there things there that they have that are similar that I can work with? And there were a lot of crossover pieces. So in the interview, I could say, well, I noticed that you have this program. I worked with a program just like that at the school that I was at previously, and this is how we interacted. So knowing those pieces, one of the elementary schools that I looked at, I got on their website. I looked at the types of things they were posting. I looked at their mission statements. I looked at what was going on with that school, and they really have a big sense of community. They really bring people in. They do a lot of outreach. They work and partner with a lot of different groups. And one of the administrators actually pointed out, she said, wow, you got that from our website. That's amazing, because that nails exactly who we are as a school. And so, to be able to say those things because I did my research shows them that I am invested in their building.
I see that it makes a great deal of sense to take a look at a school from their webpage. Would you recommend also seeing what kind of social media the school is posting or the school librarian had posted in previous? I think we have to also consider the social media component as well, because oftentimes those are where schools and school libraries will showcase things that they want to make sure the community knows about, and obviously things that they're proud about too, things that that they bring and they want their community to know about. Friends, I recorded an episode last spring, seems like an eternity ago, episode number 33, called Gainful Employment. And obviously, we're not going to be interviewing in person anytime soon. And I thought it was great that I was including questions in the show notes. But Courtney shared with me a resource which I have never seen before. And I'm so excited because it's in my show notes now. Courtney, would you please tell us about AASL's Interview Question Matrix?
Absolutely. So this is something I didn't really know about until recently either. So I've been attending most of the AASL town halls that they had, which are all recorded. You can go back and listen to them and look at the chat transcripts and everything. So all of that stuff is there. And then they had a virtual member meeting just this past Tuesday that I think you can also watch as well. But within one of those, they talked about a presidential initiative, a task force that Catherine Roots Lewis, I believe, is the AASL president, who was working with setting up conversations with administrators about the roles of school librarians. And there's a fantastic video that they did at the national conference in November that you can find on the AASL site as well. But one of the things that their administrators that they've brought in to kind of be part of this task force is school librarians developed interview questions that administrators could ask that are directed specifically at school librarians, because sometimes they don't know what to ask. Because they are not familiar with what a school librarian could or should be. And then, so the librarians developed the questions, and then the administrators provided their feedback. And now this matrix exists with all of these different roles that librarians play and questions you could ask. But I love that it's not just looked at as an interview matrix. It's also looked as like a conversation starters. So if you are currently a school librarian, you can still share this matrix with your administrator to be able to say, here's the things that our national organization thinks I need to know how to do. Let's talk about some of these things. Or if you have questions about any of these things, I'm available to talk with you. Or if someone is providing instructional coaching for you, but they're not really quite sure how because you don't fit into the box that the other teachers fit in, you can give them this document and say, here's the kinds of things that we can talk about, so that you have that available, so that they know how to provide coaching for you better. As someone who has sat in rooms with people who have trained on instructional coaching, they want to do what is going to help you become a better teacher. So if what they have for all of the other teaching staff is not working for the weird job that you do, they are very appreciative of those kinds of documents. So don't ever feel like you are stepping on anyone's toes by saying, hey, here's this thing that I just learned about. Let's see how we can use it together.
Well, and I sort of also saw it as a reflection piece, because whether you are in interviewing or you're happy in your job and you know that that's where you're going to be, it is a good reflection piece, because you can print it out, and then some of us journal, some of us just think about this and say, well, how would I answer this question, and what is it do I see in my practice? What is it I don't see in my practice? Would I be able to give a complete answer if this were asked to me today? And then even more so, take this back as a worksheet to maybe use in your PLN or your team if you meet with the other school librarians. Asking yourselves the question, how are these things, seen in our program? And if they aren't, what should we do to make sure our administration knows that these are things that we bring to our students and our staff? Let's get the bad news out of the way. You've done these interviews. What is the downside? What is the downside to having a virtual job interview?
I think the biggest thing is that the normal cues that you would take from body language, and both ways, right? Like the cues that they would take from you on body language and the cues that you take from your interviewers aren't there, because unless you look at the camera, you're not making eye contact. right?
And I'm looking at you right now. So, you and I are having this conversation, and thank goodness we can see each other, because we would be talking over each other. But you're right. I'm looking at your face, which is not the camera.
Right. So if you're talking about, the importance of making eye contact, when you're answering a question, you look at the camera, not at the person that you're responding to. So if you're looking at the camera, you miss the body language cues that are happening from the person you're talking to. But if you're watching their body, then you're not making eye contact. It's very weird how that feels. I think on both sides, because you have that little bit of disconnect from that process. So I think that's one of the things that's difficult, is that you don't have that mannerisms and body language and really, flow that you would have as well. The other thing is, like, your internet connection, if you have issues, right, can be really, really frustrating. So we had issues in the neighborhood, just it wasn't our house, it was just our area had during one of the interviews. So I had to jump off of my computer and finish the interview on my phone. Through Zoom on my phone. I was like, here, let me jump back into the call. And it was fine. It all worked out.
Well, look at you troubleshoot. I mean, that's great. You're troubleshooting, grace under pressure. Again, you only look better for this, but for some of us, some things just, if I'm in the groove and I'm in an interview, to have it interrupted like that would be very distressing. And then I would have this added stress of like, oh my gosh, what do they think about me? My dogs are being awful. And you said one of your interviews, there were 19 people on that conversation.
There were.
And you told me you were the only one being interviewed. So it wasn't like they were, a firing squad trying to get this all done.
Every person that was on the call had a different question to ask, and they were all staff members in the building. So instead of maybe 4 or 5 people who are on your interview panel, when you go in to do an interview, there's usually multiple people in the room, and they take turns asking questions, which is what 2 of the interviews were like. This one, they had a very wide range of staff members who were there, and they each had one question that they asked, and you could tell that they had done it before, right? So I guess that's the other kind of good thing of this is they've probably now done this enough times that it's not as weird for them as it is for you. So there's some definite barriers to that. And it was the same district, 3 different buildings, 3 different principals. So the principals decided how they wanted to set up their interview teams, just like they would in a real life interview. And they already had it set up as to who asked what questions. So you have those, predetermined questions that you get in a lot of job interviews. So when you go into a teaching interview, that you typically end up with a lot of the same types of questions. So I guess that's another one of those tips, is to prepare for that ahead of time. That's one of the things that I wish that I would have done better.
Yeah, well, that was my question. You're like,
your next question.
woulda, coulda, shoulda. What would you have done had you said, you don't, because I remember that happened to me in the car. Like, I'd get in the car and I'm like, oh no, I should have said this, or why didn't I mention that? And I'm thinking, you can have notes in front of you. Like, I mean, when you're interviewing for your job, you don't want to be looking down, I guess.
You can't in real life. You can't in real life, but you could have multiple screens, or if you have a wide enough screen, you could have notes kind of over here while you have your interview video going right here. And since your eye contact is not what it would be normally, you may be able to glance over and just hit some highlight stuff. So that's one thing, is to anticipate what you think the types of questions are that you're going to be asked. So a lot of times you are asked things about classroom management. You are going to be asked about working with students who are not at grade level. You are probably going to be asked about how you work with students who don't like to read. What do you do with the students who are reluctant readers? What do you do with managing, like, how do you decide what to purchase? You know, those types of questions are things that typically come up. So if you anticipate and maybe look at the AASL matrix, right, of questions, write your answers out. Just for me, sometimes writing an answer out helps me feel calmer about what my answer is going to be, because my brain is firing and trying to think of the best way to say something, and it doesn't always come out how I want it to.
Sure.
When I'm in that kind of a situation. So I feel like if I had written out my answers to those questions ahead of time and maybe just had some bullet points or some words highlighted or something like that, that I could center myself on and come back to answer those questions, I may have done that a little bit more smoothly in the process, but it seemed to go okay. I was offered one of the jobs. The other two jobs went to other candidates, but that was fine. I got the job that I was meant to have, I hope. So
wonderful.
That's, one of those, just, you cannot over prepare yourself, I don't think.
Well, and for listeners who are optimistic, we have had the benefit of teaching remotely and supporting our staff remotely and doing Zoom or Meet or whatever type of platform you've used for your virtual teaching and supporting your teachers and meeting with your staff. I feel like this is just a natural extension of what we've been doing for the past 2 months.
Yeah, it is. And I think, I had a friend who was doing a remote interview, and she was like, can I just call you so you can check out my background? So she had her computer set up and she was like, okay, how should I angle the computer? Should I raise it a little bit? Am I framed in the frame? And I was like, that is so smart I didn't think to do that. I sat in front of a bookshelf, so I had stuff behind me. But thinking about where you can be within your space so that you are away from distractions, that you have a clean-ish background. Like, you don't want to have the virtual backgrounds during a job interview because they are not a clear line around your body. And that can be really distracting when it morphs into something else by your shoulder or your ear or something like that. So find a place in your house that you feel comfortable, whether it's a blank wall or, like, I sat in front of a bookshelf. She sat in front of some shelving units with some display items that she had in her basement. But find somewhere that feels natural and comfortable for you, and then practice a call with someone that who's going to say, yes, that looks good, or how should I do this? So that way that your physical presence isn't going to be a deterrent for whomever is interviewing you. Like, you don't want to sit in your bed.
Okay, so right? Courtney's, she's not judging me right now, but listeners, I'm not lying. I'm doing this all wrong, because if I were interviewing right now, the last place I would be is in my bedroom, being backlit by a huge bank of windows. And I read something about this earlier during our quarantine, because so many people were having the monitor face the person, but behind them were all these windows. So everybody looks blacked out. Yep. And I am right now, I'm doing everything wrong today with Courtney. I am, we have a Skype conversation. I'm in my bedroom. My bed is not made. I have an enormous window behind me. And this is not where I would have an interview. Absolutely. And I don't teach from this place. I teach and I make sure I don't have a ridiculous background. But you're right. I mean, these are things you wouldn't have to think about if you were meeting in somebody's office. I will say, as somebody who has interviewed IRL in the summertime, usually on the hottest day in the Metro Detroit area, wearing a silk suit, trying to stay calm and had, navigating, I had to drive to my interview, a district I had never worked in. I didn't know where their main offices were. So you have those kinds of, you trade your stressors, right. On the one hand, you can't remove stress from the interview process. It's an important thing because it really does call upon our skills when it comes to responding to, these questions that we can anticipate. But it is important that there is this heightened level of excitement because all of a sudden it really does bring out who you are to the people who would like to hire you. But getting lost or getting stuck in traffic or sweating through your silk suit is not something you want to have to deal with. So
no, not at all. Because I've done interviews late in the summer too, and it's not fun in the humidity for sure. But you do, that's the other thing, like you still want to dress professionally, right? So you want to have an outfit on that looks professional. I did the whole thing from head to toe. I did jewelry. I did like real pants. I did shoes because I wanted to feel like I was in that process, and was in, that zone. Whereas if I had just dressed professionally to my waist, like sometimes, newscasters do or something like that, they'll have on their gym shorts with it. But I felt like I could represent myself better if I felt like I was dressed professionally. So I just did the whole thing. And I really tried on outfits to see what it would look like on Zoom. Like, does this pucker in a weird way when I am sitting? Because when you're sitting in front of a computer screen, you're only seeing part of what your shoulders, and things show. So it may look fantastic as a full outfit, but the small piece that you see doesn't look as good as maybe something else does. So I had to switch gears on what I thought I was going to wear to something else, which was fine. But what I would have worn in person was different than what I wore in the online interview.
Wow. All things I wouldn't have thought to ask, but great things. And the nice thing is that you can think about these things in advance before these interviews happen. I realize we can't control the timing of when these interviews happen or when the lawn crew shows up or the weed whipper starts going or the dogs start barking. And I think that but you're right. There are a lot of things in a virtual job interview we can control. And being prepared and doing the sort of mental exercises of walking through those questions we can anticipate. And I like the idea of having some notes, which even just the process of working through those questions. And for some of us, it's been a while since we've interviewed for a job. And so I think this is all really helpful information. I'm hoping that you will join us next season and we can talk about some of your writing and the things that you have posted in your blog. But let me ask you, you got the job and you are going to land well. Could you share with us something that excites you about your new job? Because I can tell right now you are excited and you have the summer to think about it, but tell me about your new job and why you're excited.
Well, I am very lucky. The high school that I will be going to next year is very similar to the high school that I had worked at previously, very similar student populations, very similar courses that are offered. And it feels like just this very lovely kismet that I have landed where I am landing next year because the principal is really supportive and the district is really supportive and they are okay with me trying different things and doing new things. And they really want the library to be this welcoming, vibrant space. And getting my hands on a program and building it and working with it and getting to know those kids and those teachers and just infusing everything into what happens in the building is where I find joy as a teacher, because my job as a school librarian is only important because of the teachers and the students. That's my whole purpose in existence. So if I am not doing what I can to support and lift them up, then I am not doing my job. So I can't wait to get into that. And I know that we're, a little questionable about how that's going to look, but just dreaming of possibilities right now is kind of fun.
Wonderful. Could you, I love adding, you were already part of my PLN, my virtual PLN. Would you let us know where we can find you on social media? Because I really do enjoy your posts.
Oh, thank you. I am at Live Love Library, so LIVLUV Library on Twitter. I am also there on Instagram, but I am not very good about posting on Instagram. It's not my wheelhouse. I'm still learning how best to do that. But I am pretty active on Twitter, so you can catch me there. You can Google me and look at AASL Knowledge Quest blog and look for my first and last name within that, so you can find some of the things I've written there. And it's really kind of fun that if you search for me in EBSCO, you'll find me as well. So those are fun places. But my email address is pretty open out there on Twitter. If you have questions or you want to connect, please feel free to email me. I am very happy to chat with anybody from anywhere about anything related to libraries. That is what I really, truly love doing. So please connect. Would love to hear from everybody.
Well, it has been an absolute joy talking to you. I'm so grateful that you brought this very timely message, because there are people out there right now who have interviews coming up, and I can't wait to post this episode. So thank you so very much.
And thank you. It was such fun talking with you today. It was wonderful.
I am so grateful that Courtney was able to find time at the beginning of her summer vacation to share out with our listeners. And I very much appreciate her perspectives, because I know that throughout the next few weeks, many of us may find ourselves with an opportunity to interview for a job, and guaranteed that's going to be done virtually. If you found this episode helpful, please share it out with your team, your PLN, and on social media. The topic of our next episode will be collection development and my interview with Carrie Betts. I hope you will tune in.